Welcome back to Nordic Arms and History. Today we're taking a look at a very interesting part of the Krag rifle's history, that being the Steyr Krags that ended up with the Boers during the Second Boer War. On the table here I have two of my Steyr Krags from the Norwegian Army contract that I'll be using as a reference point for markings on the Boer rifle. Also, before we get into how the Boers acquired this rifle, let's take a quick recap on what the Second Boer War actually was. This war lasted from 1899 to 1902, and it was between the British Empire and two South African republics, one being the Z.A.R, or the South African Republic, and the Orange Free State. This war was really bloody as the Boers conducted guerrilla warfare against the British that were numerically superior. Let's get into it. In November 1895 and August 1896, the Austrian weapons factory OEWG, or Steyr as we'll call them, signed a contract with Norway to produce 29,000 rifles for the army and 4,500 rifles for the Norwegian Rifle Association. Originally, Fabrique Nationale had the contract, but this was cancelled due to FN not being able to meet Norway's demands. Steyr would come to regret this contract heavily, as they had reported a loss of almost 40% of the contract value due to strict Norwegian parts control and inspections. These inspections were led by Kaptein Jacob Maximilian Gran Påske. The association rifles would end up being sold to civilians and had a lion marking as well as a factory mark. Steyr had a lot of parts to spare during the fabrication of the Norwegian contract. Påske and his inspectors were very thorough and did not accept parts and whole rifles that did not specify his standards. To minimize their already substantial financial losses on the delivery, the factory sought to repurpose discarded parts during production. The Krag-Jørgensen Rifle Company had early on in 1896 a deal with Steyr to produce rifles for the company, outside of the Norwegian Army contract. In fact, the Krag-Jørgensen Rifle Company advertised in Norway that Steyr was their rifle manufacturer. Because of this, the company had already received an offer in fall of 1896 to take possession of some of the rifles from the factory. The Krag-Jørgensen Rifle Company was created in late 1890 by Ole Herman Krag and Erik Jørgensen themselves. The company was to take care of patents, prototypes, and other objects related to the Krag-Jørgensen rifle. Another task the company had was to promote the rifle in other countries. For this reason, they had agents all over the world trying to get the rifle adopted. In fact, in Turkey, the rifle was almost adopted in the form of a carbine, however they failed as the Turkish government adopted the Mauser carbines instead. Kaptein Påske's records indicate that 24 rifles were assembled for the company around the turn of the year 1896 to 1897. These rifles were completed with the best parts discarded in the agreement between the factory and the Norwegian inspectors. The rifles did not satisfy the standards, but could be if proper gunsmithing and adjustments were made. Påske completed his work in his own spare time on the behalf of the Krag-Jørgensen Rifle Company. The 24 rifles were sent in January 1897, and in spring it was decided to purchase roughly 200 additional rifles that were offered by the factory. Påske completed his inspections here as well, with the help of his inspection officers. The company paid them especially for their work. These rifles, by all accounts, were sent late summer of 1897. Sometime into 1898, in a board meeting, it was discussed to purchase an additional 700 rifles that was offered from Steyr, but this was rejected due to the company not believing that the factory could deliver. Krag himself was mostly for the deal, but the majority of the board went for a lower number of rifles to reduce potential losses. In the end, it is unclear how many rifles were purchased by the Krag-Jørgensen Rifle Company, but it seems that a further 200 to 300 rifles were purchased. These rifles did not get a formal inspection in Austria due to the Norwegian rifle control Steyr was discontinued. The story of the acquisitions began on January 9, 1896, with a letter from Sigvald Larsen, an agent of the Krag-Jørgensen Rifle Company. In this letter, Larsen confirms that discussion had taken place with General Joubert, the Commandant General of the South African Republic, regarding shipments of rifles for trials by the Z.A.R government. According to documents, the following rifles were sent: a rifle and carbine in 8mm, a rifle and carbine in 7.5mm, and a rifle and carbine in 6.5mm. Based on this letter, we can reasonably assume that these rifles represented a mix of Danish, American, and Norwegian Krags. The letter also mentioned the efforts to secure a Norwegian officer as an instructor. The rifles were tested on May 30th, 1896, with the results favoring the adoption of the Krag by the South African Republic. During this time, there was consideration of delivering the rifles in 7mm Mauser, but the Krag-Jørgensen Rifle Company rejected this option due to the high cost and time required for retooling and production. It's important to remember that this was shortly after the Jameson raid, leaving the Z.A.R in desperate need of arms. Larsen confidently claimed that they could supply 5,000 rifles within 4 months, followed by another 5,000 each month thereafter. This was an ambitious promise, and as Larsen continued traveling back and forth in anticipation of a large order, he eventually went broke. With General Joubert still undecided on placing the order, Larsen ultimately faded from the scene, leaving T.W. Beckett & Company to take over negotiations with the Z.A.R. According to 3 separate reports from the trials, the Krag received glowing reviews. All 3 unanimously agreed that it was the best rifle they had ever tested, praising its high quality, exceptional accuracy, and impressive penetrative power. Very important to note is that this is a week after some of the same people had tested the Mauser rifle. They also noted that all parts were fully interchangeable. Based on these findings, the reviewers gave an unqualified recommendation that the Krag rifle be adopted as the national weapon. Despite its ammunition being slightly more expensive than the Martinis, they were even willing to appear before the Executive Council to personally advocate for its adoption. By 1897, 29 Krag rifles, along with ammunition, had been imported into the country. On April 22, 1897, Beckett & Company confirmed an order of 100 Krag-Jørgensen rifles and 50,000 rounds of ammunition, placed by Louis de Souza, General Joubert's secretary, on behalf of the government. The pricing was as follows: £4.15 per rifle and £7.5 per 1,000 rounds of ammunition. 1 bayonet was also ordered, however this was the only bayonet they ever ordered. 18 rifles were already assembled and marked the first batch to be shipped from Europe. This order was completed between March 1897 and February 1898. It is highly likely that this batch of 100 rifles were of the same batch of 200 condemned rifles that the Krag-Jørgensen Rifle Company had acquired via the Steyr factory. However, this order was plagued with mishaps and issues. Out of the 100 rifles, 17 arrived with cracked stocks due to poor packaging. Replacement stocks were shipped, and it is likely that these rifles were repaired, though this still remains uncertain as there's no definitive proof. What we do know is that 19 additional stocks, referred to as stokken, were imported. After this initial batch, the Z.A.R. was hesitant to place a larger order. Between the delivery of the 100 rifles and 1899, only 8 additional Krags were ordered, most of them likely being sample rifles. However, on February 2nd, 1899, Louis de Souza wrote to General Joubert noting that burghers were requesting Krag-Jørgensen rifles daily due to the rifle's growing popularity. Following this, on April 7th, an order of 175 rifles and 25 carbines was placed with Beckett & Company, at the same price as the previous batch of 100 rifles. Yet again, delivery issues pursued, and only 175 of the 200 rifles arrived in Lourenço Marques on November 11th. Unfortunately, there are no records confirming that the carbines ever arrived. Beckett & Company delivered an additional 17 rifles in March 1900, followed by 2 more 9 days later at a price of £6 each. Sadly, no further documents regarding these deliveries have been found. In total, we have evidence that the Z.A.R. received 332 Krag-Jørgensen rifles and 20 carbines. From what we know from the surviving Boer Krag rifles, we can take some pointers on how to identify them. Firstly, they have to come from the Steyr factory. As you can see here, it'll have to have the factory marking and not the Kongsberg one, as you can see here. Most of the time, they do not have a full set of Norwegian proof marks. The Boers left the markings as they were when they received the rifles, meaning a lot of the dates are often not correct to the rifle's delivery date. The rifles are not always numbers matching. That is due to the Steyr factory putting together discarded parts to make these rifles. We also know that the stocks did not have any specific markings whatsoever. As you can see here, this is an example of a Kongsberg marking on a 1894 rifle. The Boers clearly had a strong affinity for the Krag, as it was public demand to acquire more of them. Also, many high-ranking Boer officers also favored the Krag, with notable examples including number 152, owned by Field-Cornet J.N.C. Geldenhuys; number 165, presented by President Kruger himself to one of his aides; number 743, owned by General F.C. Beyers; and number 846, discovered in President Kruger's house. The most famous Boer Krag might be the one used by General Tobias Smuts. There are 2 photographs of him with his Boer Krag, as you can see here. Here is also an interesting photo of the rifle at the Battle of Magersfontein on December the 11th, 1899. We can see this by the distinct loading gate protruding at the side of the rifle, as you can see here. Although the Krag did not play a significant role in the Boer War, its unique charm and the Boers' fondness to it led to the rifle gaining a certain romantic charm. However, its high price, comparable to a semi-custom Pleitzer Mauser, limited the widespread adoption. The supply of 6.5 by 55 ammunition also posed a challenge, even though shipments continued to arrive in the country. Today, very few Boer Krags are known to exist. According to Boer Rifles and Carbines of the Anglo-Boer War by Ron Bester, a major source for this video, it is estimated that at least 15 examples survive today, each with unique markings. Relatively many of these had ties to officers or high-ranking officials, another sign of confidence in the Krag rifle. Additionally, one beautifully engraved example can be found at the Royal Armouries in Great Britain, as seen here. Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions regarding the Boer Krags, consider leaving a comment down below. I'm more than happy to answer any of them. This has been a very interesting video to make, and I love this topic a lot, and it's been something I've been wanting to make for a very long time. Also, if you feel like the video deserves it, leave it a like. It'll spread it to more people, and more people will watch it. Also, if you want to learn more about Nordic arms and history, consider subscribing. Until the next one, take care. Bye-bye.